The University of Pittsburgh Library is celebrating something really special. The August Wilson Archive, his own collection of 450 boxes, these are good-sized boxes, of scripts, notes, correspondence, recordings, images, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. From the Hill to the stage celebrating the August Wilson Archive. That's the event that we are part of. Now, scholars have already been coming to the archive and digging into it with glee, but theater people, well, here we are. We are a group of theater people. This session about using the archive to enhance productions, co-sponsored by August Wilson House, his childhood home in the Hill District, where 10 of his 11 plays are set, and they were all inspired, and the University of Pittsburgh Theater Department. And here we are on a set in the Charity Randall Theater of a production of August Wilson's Seven Guitars, which is actually going to open next week or the week after, but close before you actually see this video that we're doing now. So we're going to go around and meet this group, heterogeneous group of theater people, and then get into a conversation about how we, as theater people, hope to use the archive going forward. And we're going to start over there with you, TJ. There you are, right on the other end of the arc. So who the heck are you?
Yes, I'm TJ Young. I'm a playwright and dramaturg. I'm associate professor of dramaturgy at Carnegie Mellon University, and I specialize in new play dramaturgy.
New play dramaturgy.
Yes, yes, that's my bread and butter.
Well, now that seems to me particularly relevant to what this is going to be, but yes.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Rowland. I'm an arts maker of whatever you want to make it. I will figure out how to make it from the idea to, the end. But I'm currently the theater curator at the August Wilson Center. That's inside of Peter.
I'm Todd Kreidler, writer, playwright. Also worked with August Wilson as his dramaturg, last 3 plays of the cycle, and co-conceived his one-man show, How I Learned What I Learned.
And I'm Michelle Shea. I'm an actress, director, and professor of acting at USC School of Dramatic Arts and chair of performance there, and a Wilsonian soldier.
And a good Wilsonian soldier.
Thank you.
I wish I was a curator or a dramaturg, but I'm not. My name is Kenny Leon, and I am, most of the time, a Broadway stage director, but I've done a fair amount of directing for the regional theater as well. So I'm a director.
Well, you're an actor, too. I first saw you as an actor, playing Citizen. And
Yeah, I did do a lot, but I found along the way that I loved the art of directing more, and I felt that God allowed me to act to influence my directing. So when I'm in a room with actors, they understand, I understand the process that they're going through. And so I love working with actors, and I am satisfied as a director.
cool.
Hi, my name is Karen Gilmer. I'm a costume designer, director, and lecturer in costume design here at the University of Pittsburgh, and I'm also directing and costume designing this production of Seven Guitars.
So you're responsible for everything.
Yes.
This is wonderful that we can be in this space at this time. Yes. Thanks, Karen.
Is the set finished?
No.
Oh, okay. I'm glad.
Hi, Monte Russell. I'm an actor, writer, performed in 10 of the 11 in the canon.
I just wanted to do a footnote here to explain why we say 10 plays at some points and 11 plays at other points. Just about everybody knows that August wrote 10 plays, one set in each decade of the 20th century. But he did write an 11th play. That's a one-man kind of autobiographical play for him to do as himself. He wrote it in 2003. It's called How I Learned What I Learned, but it is set in 1965 when he was a young man just having gotten an apartment on the Hill District. But it's also draws on everything he knows from the whole period of his writing plays. So it doesn't quite fit in the cycle at all.
including-
So here on the left-hand column in what you're looking at is the way most people think of the plays. They think of them as fitting the different decades. So Gem of the Ocean, 1904, Joe Turner, 1911, Ma Rainey, 1927, and so on, right up to Radio Golf in 1997. And at the bottom of the list, I've added How I Learned What I Learned, which mainly takes place in 1965, but also is written from the point of view of 2003. You can consider it as a preview to the cycle or as a coda, looking back at the cycle. Now, the way the plays were written on the right-hand column, Ma Rainey was first, and then Fences, Joe Turner, and so on. I have Jitney down there in the 7th place. It was actually the first written, but he then put it in a drawer and returned to it in the 1990s to flesh it out and rewrite it more. So I think that's the appropriate place for it. And then King Henley, and then he wrote How I Learned What I Learned in 2003, and then Gem of the Ocean and Radio Golf. So the cycle, American Century Cycle, is 10 plays, but there is an 11th play which refers to the material.
Originating the role of Youngblood and also playing Mr. on Broadway. So I'm pleased to be here.
Yeah, that's a very important point, that Monte was the first Youngblood in 1982 in the production of Jitney, when it still had an exclamation point as part of the title. So you must have known August before any of us. I met him in '84, and Kenny comes along much later. You're so young.
Yeah, right. I met him in '89 when I saw my first Broadway play, which was Fences. I met Broadway late by a lot of standards, but in 1989 I saw James Earl Jones and Mary Alice do that play on stage, and met August Wilson that same production.
Wow, wow. And when, Michelle, when did you meet August?
1994, but I mean, that was in person at the O'Neill working on 7 guitars, the beginning of 7 guitars. But the first thing I saw was Ma Rainey, which blew my mind.
Yeah.
That was incredible.
And Todd, I don't think anyone here has had a closer connection to August than you have, but it was kind of late in his process.
Yeah, October 27th, 1999 is when I met him.
Approximately then.
Yes, approximately about 2:23 in the morning. Or no, not the morning. That was later. That came later. This was the afternoon.
I wanted to know about that meeting.
That was a long time. That was the all-nighters that happened later. But and actually, it was here in Pittsburgh, close. The hotel was where the Ruddy Duck used to be. Maybe the downtown. I can't remember the actual hotel, but I had come. Someone was putting in the computer, and I was his assistant on King Henley II. But I wanted to meet Mr. Wilson. Let me be clear, Mr. Wilson. Before rehearsal started, because it was going to be a big room, and so I met him, and that's when I had my first backstage look at his writing, and in big letters it said, "The man in the green hat walked into the ballroom," and I was like, "Oh my God, that's like some fresh August Wilson." It had just been written and he had it in big font on his screen, and it took me about 8 months before I asked him what that was, and turned out it was a poem about the guy who assassinated Malcolm X, as he imagined it, in a poem that he had written, The Man in the Green Hat, in the Abaddon Ballroom. Anyway.
So, TJ, Karen, Stephanie, did you ever actually meet him along the way? So we've got 2 generations, the old farts and the young, sort of, something like that. But we're all here partly because of our excitement about August Wilson, our excitement about the archive. But I'd like to hear from you individually about why you are here. What's exciting about the arrival of this incredible bulk of material here in Pittsburgh? What do you think? You don't have to tell us all the reasons, but what for you is particularly exciting? I should tell the audience that we had a very quick look this afternoon at a couple of items from the archive, just, at the tip of the iceberg. So I could start with anyone. Anyone want to start out with that? Why are you here?
I think for me, being here completes my idea or image or understanding of August. So I think that August has, without his knowledge, I think he has mentored a lot of us. You know, whether we knew him personally or not, he's mentored us. He's given us life lessons through his plays. And I think, however, whatever door you walk through or window you climbed in to meet Mr. Wilson, when you experience his writings, it fills in the blank of other stuff. So he becomes bigger. So like for me, I directed 10 of the plays. I was in probably 5 of the plays. I worked at the Kennedy Center to produce 10 of the plays. Todd and I started the August Wilson monologue competition for young people. So that's a lot. But when I read those papers, I say, oh my God, oh, look what that production in Pittsburgh was like. Look what that production on Broadway was about. Look at the video there when you see this one and Viola Davis sitting there with the words like, oh, it just reminds you, if you're in a production that is not as simple and effortless as that, you're kind of missing it. You're missing the beauty of it. So it tells you, it informs you what not to do, what glorifies his works, what uplifts his work, what makes it more authentic. So for me, it just fills in the blank. So I had one feeling today, but when those writings and those videos rushed over me, it created something bigger than what I knew to be Mr. Wilson.
Okay. Anybody else? Karen?
So for me, I discovered why the play takes place in the yard rather than where it originally was supposed to take place, was in Vera's kitchen. But he wanted to embrace the community of African American people and the culture. But also spaces have identity. And I think having the space, having it an open space created more opportunity for for identities to merge culturally. But being in a kitchen, you know, it sort of shifts the power structure. So it's Vera's kitchen. So there's certain things you can do in Vera's kitchen and certain things you can't do. But outside in the yard, everybody can do what it is that relaxes them or whatever that may be.
I'm sorry, is that something you discovered from the archive?
Yes.
Oh, really?
One of the in fact, in one of the shelves, there is the script with the crossed out, and then it says "in the yard." And it's the first 3 minutes I was in the archive, and I was there to find out what was Headley's deal? Where was Headley from? Where he had originated from, and then discovered something even better about how the play came to be in the yard.
Yeah. 7 Guitars is full of questions, though, full of interesting things to discover. Okay, so other reasons to be excited about this?
You know, I want to get my hands on those drafts, right? Because I think that playwriting is such a craft, and even just today, being able to look through and seeing where things were crossed out, seeing where lines were expanded, seeing where things were simplified, and seeing how August was finding that rhythm in the words and the text as productions continued, and seeing how they change from production to production is something that I am like so excited to have access to in like my backyard, because I think that there's something about seeing a play grow and find what it wants to be through productions that a lot of people don't get an insight of unless you are like working on a new play, right? And the drafts feel like they are that archive of how those things change and grow as new people are introduced to it, as new actors find that voice and the rhythm of those characters. So that's one thing I'm super excited to just like.
And you can face the fact that, let's say you're doing Jitney, there are 50 scripts over there.
Right. Yeah, and realizing that it's all meticulously chosen, right? Especially when I think the couple times I've aided younger directors and going to any text and they say, I think I want to cut this, I think I want to change this, to be like, no, there was a reason. It was worked out already for you. Just work with what he gave you. And being able to point to that process, I think is really powerful, actually.
One of the things that I think is going to be invaluable is to get closer to what August's intention was versus just ours. And in the different versions of the plays, it tells you a lot. I remember I played on Esther, and there I didn't understand the relationship with Eli, and this gentleman offered me a page from another version of the play that helped me fill in exactly what I needed. And so I know also from doing 7 guitars, every time something was cut or adjusted, the fact that we had those other lines helped us understand the character even better.
I think
you know.
hitchhiking off your idea, having been one of the directors that August Wilson worked with, like in the room, and done 2 plays with him and the 3rd one after him. The archives, it doesn't take the place of a living August, right. Yeah. But it helps you bridge that gap between an artist who was there and an artist who was not. So you get a feel for him. You get even just to seeing the way his handwriting is. Once you see his handwriting, once you see him write his name, it's a part of him that you can carry with you forever. So I think as opposed to not knowing anything about a writer, this lets you get a sense of the writer. And if you get a sense of the writer, it gets you closer to sort of getting to his intent of why he wrote this, why he shaped that character that way. And it will be impossible to create characters in some ways based on you getting all of the information.
But that's wonderfully strong idea. It connects a little bit with what you said earlier, that he is now alive through it, alive in a different way. Of course, he's alive in his plays. Yes. He's alive in our memories. He's alive in the art. But here he is.
Here in the library, he becomes alive through all 10 of his plays. So you get all 10 of the plays on top of each other. You also get his thoughts about all those plays and different versions of them. And he also reminds us the importance of a cast and the importance it is. I have a thing when I'm in a Broadway play, I tell the actors, I said, good repetition, repetition is good, but good repetition is better. So when August was around, they would go through all these different cities with different casts, and you keep working on the piece. That's good repetition. Some of the times we're in rooms and we don't have good repetition. We just, we just do it. We just got to do this for 3 weeks and then we're going to have opening. But being in that room reminds me of the importance of process, the importance of good process, and also the collaborative nature of what it is that we do. And, how August, how he heard the actors in the room, how he heard, oh, I had it this way, then Monte said it that way. Let me put that down, So he was very inclusive of his, even though it's specific to what he wanted to say, it still was him listening to the world in the room, and him and Todd, listening and rewriting and working on stuff. So yeah, it's a real special day.
Yeah. Now, if I was a young actor, to piggyback on that, if I was a young performer or a young budding artist and view this archive and to see the mistakes or the scribblings and the rewrites and the, no, that's not it, and you didn't fail, that's just not it. Just go back to the drawing board and see that what the process is. It's not about getting it right the first time. It's not about being being perfect. It's about going further and going deeper. I know when we were doing Jitney back in the day, it was before computers, so the pages were typewritten. You could see the the whiteout, or you could see the little and so, but all that, but we didn't judge it. Nobody judged it because we couldn't judge it. But it's just the fact, if I was a budding young artist and see, hey, you have versions, archive them yourself. Put that notebook that you scribbled this, that, and you wrote a note, and you're watching something else, and it fed the story that you were writing, and archive that, and you never know if you're gonna have to bring it back. Because that's one thing about when we were doing King Hedley on Broadway, some stuff will be cut in one city but be brought back in another city. You remember that monologue? Yeah. So it's like, remember that monologue? Now you have to. So if I'm a budding artist, I'm training, I'm thinking, yeah, there's no time to be frustrated. Simply understand it's all part of the process. Archive it, put in that notebook, go get another one, start again, come back, keep reshaping it, and things like that.
Because how many tablets do they have in the Library of August? Like 700, did they say?
Yeah.
700.
And that's these kind of tablets. Yeah.
And Todd used to always tell me, like, writing is rewriting. You know?
Yeah. Well, let's continue. So, why are we excited to be here? What?
For me, I guess as the next generation, I was introduced to August Wilson's
What do
work.
you mean you next generation? You trying to say I'm old? What do you mean?
I'm coming after you. That's it.
Oh, okay. It takes all of us.
That's the only thing I said.
All right. Okay.
But like, I was introduced to his work actually technically a year after he passed, right? Like my first one was like, I co-directed 7 Guitars in undergrad in 2006. So for me, this is like, I'm also designing a series based on his like life, artistic practice, and process. And this is a treasure trove of all of that. And I think it also combats the American tendency to create these like singular magical figures. Like, you know, he just came up with these things and then that is it. And he didn't do any work and it was just like this, like it just came out of him and that was all. And this goes completely against that. He has 700 that we have access to, right? That he didn't throw away. And just like seeing notes, seeing him taking information from other people and incorporating it, seeing pictures from things, seeing how they changed, how they came back, like all of that will enhance, at minimum, my series, right? Which is what I'm trying to introduce people to, this human being who created art and also was a human and lived in a place at a time. And I'm trying to give them access to him and then also access to his work in a new way and bring that to life for folks. But just like diving into his thought process and seeing how like a poem would inspire a character or like characters will return in different places until like, what did the archivist say? Until he found a landing, like a home for them. Just seeing that concept is like, oh, it inspires me as an artist, but also as a curator. It's like, oh, I'm gonna be living in these archives, okay? They're gonna know mine. I mean, like, it's me again. I'm here to look at like notebook number, 732, bring it out, and I'm gonna be in here for an hour. Just trying to understand what he was thinking about, why did he want to send us this message? Why is history important? Why 400 years of Black history? You know what I mean? Like he says that a lot. Like why is it important for us to like go dive in and like mess around in all of the world, the fictionalized hill district they created to build a better future? Because for me, it's a message in there, which is like when we lose Aunt Esther in the 80s, like things go to shit. Can I say that? Okay. I already said it, yeah. So like things go to shit, right? And there's a reason that it goes to shit because you lost your access to who you are and where you come from. So I don't want to lose, I feel like he's still giving me more, even though I've never met him, right? He's still giving me more messages that is like, don't forget where you come from. This is where I come from. All these 70 drafts of like, this play is where I come from. Now take that and build something with it and give it to somebody else.
And you did meet him. You met him through his work.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I'm like, Mr. Wilson, I didn't meet him, but that's how it feels like I want to talk about him like I was.
I remember he used to say, it was like people would say like, oh, I have thoughts about that play and like, I don't like the way you wrote the women. And August said, where was she when the page was blank? And I always loved that idea. Where were they when the page was blank? Because that's what he's uplifted the role of the writer. It's like, can you imagine when the page is blank before you could give your notes about what you liked?
Yeah, he talked about that
and
a
it's
lot,
like,
actually.
But it was a blank page, and I think so he helps budding writers. Like, you can do this. Just start with a blank page or a blank napkin or...
And the process is messy. And I feel like, and he held on to that. Like, his handwriting is everywhere.
He struggled. He always called himself a struggling playwright. And sometimes journalists would like that, but kind of the jealousy. And he's like, no, I'm always struggling to write a better play. And you can see sort of what I experienced, those pages at 3 a.m, come under the door, call at 6 a.m. Todd, man, did you read the pages, man? What'd you think, man? You gonna get some breakfast? And he was always working. And I knew him at, the last 6 years of his life, 2 Pulitzers, highly accomplished, and he was relentless. I mean, he was never, you can see that in the archive. So the archive lets people hang out with him like those of us who knew him did. And I think it's legit that you feel him in that, because I would say one thing he taught me is, from a writing vantage, that characters are ideas and attitudes. Like if you want to boil down what he was doing, skin down what a character is, are ideas and attitudes. So now you get to really experience his ideas and attitudes. How did they change over time from like those, when he's writing in pencil in the 70s and the African Grove Institute, and you see that writing and you can see how that changes over time, and you can learn how Like you look in his archives, you'll see all the newspapers he collected. That might give you an idea for stool pigeons, so you just don't think that he's just a guy who say, oh, you got to know that, and he's cussing out Ruby. Like, why does he collect those newspapers? What's behind that? So for makers, it's like what Michelle said. It's yes, directing's interpretation, but you have to have something. You have to have some kind of grist or some kind of material, like you went digging.
Intention.
Exactly, like you went digging around. Like you have to have a conversation with him. So this lets you hang out with him.
You know what I saw today? It was a sheet of paper. It said the railroad speech by Doker in the piano lesson. He had cut it, but it didn't. It's not cut.
No, it's not cut.
No, it's a beautiful speech. But I was like, at one time he said,
cut it.
Cut it.
Yep.
You know, and he had his reasons for it. But then I'm like, how did he come back to that? So that tells me if I ever do that play again, I got to understand he came back to that more than once. He came back to that. So that's more important than I could play it. It's like, what's the importance of that railroad speech and in that scene? So archives are great.
It's interesting. I remember the last lengthy interview. By the way, I didn't identify myself when we went around. So I'm a critic, so I'm sort of outside the group here, and a teacher.
You're closer than you think.
Yeah, right.
That's the problem. Critics think they're outside of it. You're not outside of it.
No,
You're part of
and
the
I
family.
became, after
Right.
6, 8,
There's
whatever
only one
it
you,
was,
Chris.
after any,
And your love of August Wilson.
Yeah.
His writing.
yeah,
that's why
after
we're all
enough
here.
years of knowing him and becoming a friend, I stopped that kind of critic distance thing and thought, I'm here to help explain, to help love. In any case, the last long interview I had with him was when Gem of the Ocean was held up in Boston. It hadn't made it to New York yet. There was something about the financing. I can't remember the exact story. And he said he'd had a little more time to work on the script and he'd cut a bunch out. He said, and here I am, an experienced playwright.
I wish he'd have said that to me. Anyway, go ahead.
You were just coming on board at that point, weren't you?
That was after I came on board.
Ah.
I directed the Boston production.
Right,
We had a lot of
right.
turmoil and,
Right.
so
Well, but he said, now here I am, an experienced playwright, and I'm still learning that less can be more in a certain situation. There's so much to learn, and we all know that he had so much that he was working on when he died, that he was so glad to have finished the cycle because he had other plays, he had novels, he had the poems, he had so much else he wanted to do, and he was only 60 years old. But let's get back to the use of the archive now. So I'm curious if we can focus on a couple of your specialties, and let's start with actors. You said something about this, and so did Monte. I'm really curious how you think actors can use the archive researching for a part.
Well, Felicia Rashad talks about a phrase she calls entering the life with August's work. And there is a way that you can do August that is like a play, you're just doing it, but for your soul, which is what the invitation when I say Wilsonian warrior, it means there's a commitment to having the opportunity to be in the world of August Wilson in any form, like as an actor, director, etc. There's a place that he invites me to as a human being, as an African American, that really I have not experienced any other writer inviting me to. And that there is a way, if you're willing to, how can I put it, be humble enough to really listen, a door can open that takes you to the City of Bones. It's very, very deep. And you have to be humble to like sit in front of it and really, really listen and not feel like you have to do it. It does you. And to me, the only other playwright in my experience that invites me to that place has been Shakespeare. Where you can do it over and over and over again and never get to the bottom of what's there for you to express, create, or experience. I mean, I could definitely say in my life just like Jesus Christ, there's before August and after August for me as an artist. Does that answer?
Well, we'll be quiet for a little moment here as we soak that up. I mean, that's deeply touching. How would the archive help an actor feed that process?
Because you can go and really deeply explore the world of creativity and get to know him that way. I mean, and also what's exciting for me is that we can have dramaturgs that are trained in helping people interpret August by being able to have access to the archives. I mean, I'm already thinking about, gee, when can I come up and make a reservation at a hotel and just be there for a week and explore everything, you know?
Feed the memories, right?
Yes.
Doesn't what Aunt Esther said? Those memories, you have to feed
Yes,
them,
these
right?
memories, yeah.
So there's instruction.
Because like even today, I have to say, in the clip that we saw in which Viola and I were doing a scene from Seven Guitars, there were lines that I said that I completely forgot were not there anymore, you know?
Which one?
Which I can't.
So,
Don't do that
so
to
wait
me.
a minute, you mean lines that have been cut before the performance you remember, or lines that aren't here?
No, lines that were not in the script anymore.
Oh.
That were completely cut.
Huh.
A whole section of them. Well, it was only like 2 or 3 lines.
Yeah, but still,
You
that's
know,
a lot
She
for,
doesn't
Yes.
mention
for
her
an
age
actor.
anymore.
Huh?
She doesn't mention her age anymore.
Who?
Louise.
Louise.
So,
you did
Karen,
that.
so you're doing
48.
Seven Guitars. I mean, you're well into it, obviously. So, how would you be able to use the archive for your actors? Can you imagine a specific way, other than feeding your own mind, of course, as you're directing them? But is there any way you can?
I think for me, it's the women characters in Seven Guitars, and how they're placed in this play and how they're in their function. So I'm really interested because that's probably it has the most. Well, besides Joe Turner's Come and Gone, it has the most roles.
Yes.
For
Yes.
women. So the characters in my play are all students. So so they get an opportunity to go and look in the archives and discover Vera, Ruby, and Louise, not just through the script, but also through what he left in his notes. I love looking at in his notebooks, and he's got caricatures of himself all over in different. Sometimes the beard's really pointy, sometimes the beard is not. But that is where I would start with the students is to do those character investigation with the archive.
But your cast isn't all students. You have some.
So we have four equity actors.
Yeah. So I would like to ask you that question. How is that working? But that's not really our subject today, so we'll talk about that sometime. So, Monte, something else about how an actor can, use such an archive.
Yeah. First, you got to humble yourself, know what you're going into, what you're going to learn, what you're going to listen to, what you're going to read. And I think you might need it as a prerequisite because Wilson is, while it's very exciting and fun to do, Wilson is very difficult to do as well. Very, very challenging. And the more clues and cues you can get from outside material, and they could make it smoother for you. But like I said, the humbleness this is not just your regular run-of-the-mill playwright. This dude was deeper than that. And so bow down, take your hat off, learn whatever you get, because every person who comes in there is going to get something different. This actor might get something, that actor, the actress, older actor or older, might get something totally different. So, and that's the beauty of it, that's the richness of it. There's so much to get from it, and you can't go in there knowing that I'm specifically going to learn this. You don't know. You just got to be open to it and take out of that room what you take and go do your work. And it's going to what you learn is going to stay with you and it's going to inform you. And you just got to let it happen. That's the beauty of.
It's interesting you say that because you come to his plays, you've done them all, the cycle, and you come to them with the experience of growing up in Pittsburgh, I mean, knowing Pittsburgh and coming and doing a lot of the plays here. You would seem to be already prepared with the August Wilson background as a sense of the world he's writing out of.
The world, but not the characters. Well, the world, but the Pittsburgh characters, the historic characters, the coach, Corey's coach, Coach Zawinski, and actually people who are real people. Like in Jitney, you come in, hey, Beans, to charge 90 cents for gas, and Beans is literally across the street. Everybody, or I went to Hams, and Hams to get a haircut, that kind of stuff. That, yes, but the characters, he's not just writing characters that are from Pittsburgh. He's gone beyond that, and you got to have your chops right. You can't just be from Pittsburgh. You can't just have done the shows. You got to.
I don't know why that's funny.
Well, I'm just saying, you got to have more than that, because that work, it will chop you up if you don't have the chops to chop back. As simple as that, So that's my take on that.
Yeah, I think people, no, as I always say, no disrespect to Shakespeare, but he don't have anything on August Wilson in terms of development of character, in terms of the poetry in his writing, the beauty in watching monologues, the way spirituality or the question for spirituality finds its way in there. And I was sitting in the library today, and it reminded me of sort of like August's real life. He's like, the teacher didn't believe in me. I'm gonna drop out and I'm gonna go to the library every day. This archives feels like that's the library you can go to every day to it's like a lot of times an actor might get, I'm directing Hamlet this year, and it's like people, you're doing Shakespeare's Hamlet and I need to go and do this. It's like, well, you need to have the same preparation for an August Wilson play. Yes. You need to go back and understand, like I go back and understand what 1550 was like. You need to go back and see what 1982 was about. You need to understand the way her mother spoke and how slavery, got into radio golf, which takes place in the 90s, So it's like, it reminds us that what we do as art, it's a craft to it. And we always want to belittle what black writers do, like, they're just writing about what happened in their life. No, there's a craft behind it, and I think August wanted to always be in that army of those soldiers like Arthur Miller, Tennessee Williams, Shakespeare. So yeah, he wants to be in that whole group, but I don't think any one of them, Lorraine Hansberry's in that group too. But they don't have anything on August. He wants to be in that group with those great writers, and as artists, we're working on our art. We're trying to get better. We're looking for hints of craftsmanship, and I think you can find that as evidence in the archive.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I have the Shakespeare thing. I love what Kenny said. So imagine if we had Shakespeare's notes and changes, and you could watch something like, I remember sitting in King Hedley early on and watching just one of Mister's lines where he said, he's talking about the threat of Purnell's cousin looking for him, and he goes, hey King, you seen Purnell? He's riding around looking for you. Like the original line, I'm butchering this a little bit, the original line was he's riding around looking for you, and August is like, well, okay, August is like, imagine a painter like Picasso, and he's like, well, that wasn't quite right. Well, he's riding around in a Buick looking for you, right? So Buick went in, then he's like riding around in a red Buick looking for you, then riding around with a red Buick, got a fake telephone, right? So now he's painting another character, and he's telling you about Mister, because Mister is both observing those details, and he's a trickster because he's fucking with King, because he's like, man, he's out there looking for you, got that fake telephone, blah, 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 blah. But you can see that, like if you look at the archives, you can see those little cuts and those little brush strokes, and imagine if we could do that for Shakespeare, like before we got To Be or Not to Be or whatever, we saw all the fucked up, the things that weren't there and cut out. So it's sort of like you were talking earlier about, right, it provides a roadmap for those of us who, because we're all struggling. I mean, he was struggling, he was struggling to, bam, 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 to be, it's possible.
Thinking about something you said to me a long time ago. It's like at the end of Fences, Gabe looks up and he's like, and that's the way that go. Which at one time they were debating there should be a line like, hallelujah. Yes. But that's the way that go. opens it up and takes it way outside of the church, but says something else about the culture. Or if you look at the end of Gem of the Ocean, and the last word is "so live." So the beauty of that, that's writing with mayonnaise on it. That's,
but he's a poet, and that the
Yeah,
archives
and it
allows
finds
you
way in
into
there.
the
Right.
fact that he's a poet, and that's where it started, right?
Yes.
And you can see the poetry, and you see the songs that he wrote in there, and like.
But our job as artists should be, I think, the first question is like, why did this woman or why did this man write this? What
Yes.
were the intentions of the writer? Now you can
Yes.
shape it and do whatever you want on top of that, but if you're not going to do that, then you need to go and write your own play.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
It's
absolutely.
like, what is the writer's intent? And I think this helps us understand, for a director, it helps us understand his intention. And then we can be an artist all around his intention, but you can't disrespect and disregard his intention and then like, I'm gonna do this. Go do that. No, go write your own play. That's something else. That ain't this play.
Well, I do want to deal with the whole question of dramaturgs, and but let me go to directors right now. So, would you, as a director, would you send actors to the archive with specific instructions, or asking them to search and discover and deepen themselves, or how could you use it? We're sort of guessing. We don't know. We've had a little tiny look at the archive, but you know, the whole experience of getting into the depths of it is still ahead of us. Here is the most interesting footnote or sidelight to our program, and that is the guide to the archive, which the University of Pittsburgh Library has produced. And you go to it on the website, and you'll see all this list under blue here of how they've arranged this huge archive, and then they describe it on the left. You go down, there's a brief biography of August and how you can cite the material if you're quoting it in your scholarly or whatever journalistic writing. And then you come to the container list. And this is fascinating. Now you'll notice some of the containers say forthcoming. That means the material has not been sorted out yet. But under the first one, American Century Cycle, you go and you'll find there's a box of scripts for Fences or Gem of the Ocean, or for example, Jitney. You go down here, drafts and scripts, and there's script after script after script of Jitney, prepared at different times as the play was growing. I'm going to move back here, and further down, just take you a little further down, just quickly to show you some of the riches that this list includes: audiovisual recordings, awards, et cetera, film and television adaptations. A lot of these are letters back and forth for possible film and audio creations, which didn't actually happen, but you'll see how active August was in dealing with possible adapters. And then I love, let's see, other writing and speeches, play scripts. And you'll come to all the plays we don't know because they're not part of the American Century Cycle. Black Bart and the Sacred Hills, which he did produce in Minneapolis, in St. Paul, and Coldest Day of the Year, Fullerton Street, which was at one point his 1940s play. And then you come down the Homecoming, you go down long enough and you come to How I Learned What I Learned, from handwritten notes through all the scripts as it developed. In other words, this finding list, and I'm zipping back here, this finding list is full of the material that was originally in this 450 box archive. Extraordinary. Can we imagine in our roles in the theater using it in specific ways? So what would you do as directors for your actors?
So I research. But the thing about researching history for August Wilson, you can know the period, but his characters are living
within the period.
Don't
Thank
hit your
you.
microphone.
I knew you saying
We
that.
wanna hear your
I'm gonna sit my
voice.
hands right here.
This is a director working on a
Yes.
director.
Sorry, I can't
you
help
see.
it. I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. And so I find that interesting is to, while doing the research of the period, is working with the characters within the period and how they are dealing with what is going on in the period. That I really appreciate, and as a costume designer, also looking at why people wear what they wear for their jobs and for the occasion. So as I'm designing the costumes for this play, we're in May, so it's not quite warm, but it's not quite cold, but it's still spring, so you want to watch the colors. And so he's very specific. It's May 9th, 1948. And so I can go and get that information, what the weather was like. And then
But sometimes he contradicted
and I was
history.
going to say that.
He contradicted history.
Yes.
History was this, but I'm going to say this.
Right.
So which also said something else, like, ain't that important? Let me give you the
Right.
idea of
Exactly.
it. So it's that different kind of way of looking at history.
Exactly.
Yeah, he moves
Young
those
blood.
fights, for example.
Yes, he does.
Yeah.
He does.
Yeah. You were saying.
Oh, I was saying, like, I feel like we're like, adding the layers of all the people that work on theatrical productions. But I was like, if I have my producer hat on, I want the whole team to go. Like, you know what I mean? A year before we even get into rehearsal, as soon as we have the team, we're all going into the archives to understand the context, because the context of all of it is important, kind of like what Karen was saying, which is like why, how, where, when, you know what I mean? And to what end, right? Like, we're trying to get all those questions in so that we can build whatever this production, our version of it, is about to be. And all of that is for the first time, you can actually be like, why? Oh, you know what I mean? Like, I can flip to the notebook and actually know why. And then we can take our interpretation of that later and make it like, our individual production. So we're not just repeating the same thing over and over again. But, you know what I mean? The answers to some of those questions are no longer like supposition, is that the right word? Like, we're not just assuming. We can actually go in and find, like, in his handwriting, he went from this idea to this idea to this idea. So this is why he wanted us to do this, or this is how he wanted us to do this. And now what are we going to do with that information with the individuals that are in the room? You know what I mean? And then do that. So I'm sending everybody to the archives.
We as a group have to
Yeah.
have to have that experience and then deal with it.
Yeah, because you have things you're looking at, like, you can't recreate or like make up, like a producer and a director, or a director and an actor, like finding something together on a piece of paper and being like, oh, right? And that the archives are giving people that opportunity. So you having that, oh, I get it moment, or oh, you know what, now we know why we need this to be cerulean as opposed to cobalt, right? There's a reason, right? And like, the audience is like, wow, this is beautiful. Oh my God, they're working together so well, and it's like seamless, and wow, an ensemble play, like, all those things, and all that comes from those moments, which is like, we decided cerulean because we know what this means, and this is, and then, but this is like a year before anybody steps into the rehearsal room, right? Like, we're doing all of that work to layer in so that when somebody's running in off stage, from off stage, from somewhere, wearing something, why, like, we feel it and it makes sense. And I feel like you can get that. This is an amazing opportunity to do that with somebody, like a body of work this large.
Sure. Well, okay, so, what about the dramaturgs? So you're teaching
Yes.
dramaturgy
Yeah.
at Carnegie Mellon, so you must be able to explain to us what the hell that means.
I mean, being a dramaturg is being so many things and then so few things depending on what you need, right? Especially with production dramaturgy, it is helping provide that research for a production team. It's helping support the director in finding what they need, helping the actors kind of dig deeper, right? Especially in educational settings when, we're asking students to do that and also learn, like, Indo-European history and also French on the side. How do you support them in approaching a work like August Wilson's so that way they can get as much from it as they possibly can, right? So the dramaturgy department does that. On new works, it is also being the eyes in the room during rehearsals, being another ear when you know what the intent of the work actually is, when other voices start to come in and start to try to influence the work, right? All for the better. But if a playwright and dramaturg are together, and I know you can speak to that, like you can really start to look out for the intention of the work. And sometimes it's just by being like, hey, I know you're working hard. Did you eat today? You know, take care of yourself so that way we can take care of the art together. And coming into the archives and having primary resources to go to find intentionality for your actors, to find information for your designers, to not only prepare the production team to take on the work, but also prepare the audience to take in the work, because taking in a piece of August Wilson's work is a different experience than any other playwright that I've experienced, right? Part of the things I saw in the archives today was actually an education packet from a production of Gem of the Ocean. And there are things that I took for granted as a Black man who's raised in the South. With my great-grandmother, she died when she was 99 years old, right? So there were stories and history that was passed down to me. But just looking into that, into the education packet for Gem of the Ocean and seeing how much of a section was dedicated to the Middle Passage, right? And I was like, these are things I know, right? But audience members need to know this coming into the work so that way they can take as much away from it as they possibly can too. Knowing what August's intent was, so that way you can prepare other people to take in the work as well. As a dramaturg, like it's an invaluable resource to be able to dig in that deep, to prepare everyone for the ceremony, you know, to take it in.
Also, I think it's exciting to discover the threads in all 10 of them that run through. Like when we did all 10 of the plays because of Kenny at the Kennedy.
We should say something about it, because not take care of the audience is one of the things you were saying. So not everybody watching us here knows about that. You want to say something about that program at Kennedy Center?
After we lost August, this gentleman right here created the opportunity with the Kennedy Center for us to do costumed readings of all 10 of the plays. And we had people that were Wilsonian soldiers, meaning those of us that had done the plays, and then they were brand new people to the work. And Kenny would say, well, let's see who's supposed to be here. Mm-hmm. And what happened is we ended up doing the plays. We did it, let's see, we did them as they were written first, and then we did them chronologically. And that was a totally different experience, both of them.
Yeah, what we did all 10 plays chronologically, and we had David Gallo design 3 sets. You know, the yard set, the office set, and the parlor set. So every play fit into that. We hired 7 directors, gave each director said you can use 2 props, you know, and they had costumes. So we had the sets, costume set, and then we had a script design with August's shape of his face on and the color of our hands, and you held the script as if it was an extension of your hand. But these were Wilsonian soldiers, so most of them they knew the line. So people came to see the play. In a weekend, you could see all 3 plays. And then what American do you know has written 10 plays? So we wrote all these plays, and to see one behind the other, behind another, from Gem of the Ocean to Radio Golf, just a great feeling. And it was 42 actors and 7 directors. And it was just great. One thing I was thinking about while you were talking in terms of how it relates to directors, August forces us to not only know what his intention was, but he forces us to read American history ourselves. So as Americans, some of us don't know, so you can't, if you're going to approach his play and you're going to say, all the producers, directors, actors, go take it, it makes you like, no, go and read the history. Read the history. Now read about this, see where this play fit into that history and see what about it is true or not true.
Mm-hmm. Why this boxing game? Why is it important? Why are they listening to it now? What does that mean to them? And why, you know what I mean?
And in 1905, were the steel mills really around like that? I don't know. Were they? You know what
Well,
I mean?
they were, but they weren't like he portrays them in Gem
but
of the
it
Ocean.
forces
That's
you
okay.
to do something. Like, don't be lazy. Do the work, you know? Do you know what the time right after slavery was really like? You know, when Sally Two Kings says, I got to go 800 miles to get my sister. Oh, slavery's over. I got to go 800 miles to get my sister. She's like in trouble. And I got 800 miles. One way is 800 miles coming back. The sacrifice of somebody that was willing to do that in 1905, and in present day, are we willing to do that for our sister?
And also,
Are
you're
we
doing
ready
it
to go
on
back?
foot.
We're not even ready to go 30 miles.
Yeah. But what does it mean? Like, you're on foot and hitchhiking on carriages, you know what I mean? Getting on the back of a train. Like, 800 miles is a different 800 miles than right now, right? Like, I'll get in my car, drive 800 miles, you know what I mean? Or get an Amtrak, drive 800
I'm
miles.
imagining getting across those rivers and
Yeah.
through those swamps, and yeah,
That's what I'm saying.
no.
Like, and like reminding you that we were free, but you were still, you know what I mean? Like, that was that wasn't
It was
just
more
800
dangerous,
miles. That
not
was
more, but it's just as dangerous after
dangerous
slavery.
800 miles, yeah.
They're not giving up that capital.
And like knowing what it meant to get those like notches on his the walking style, like, you know what I mean, 2 at a time, 3 at a time, 4, like, you know what I mean, like what he did 800 miles each time, like, if you don't know that, if you don't find that, and what it meant for a black man to do that at that time.
And that play in 1904 says a lot about, we still got the Electoral College. You know what I'm saying? We still got that now.
And when
What reason do we have to have that now?
when you read stuff and you're like, this is from 1911 or 1907, and the joke is relevant, and you're like, oh.
Stephanie, I'm really,
All of us.
I'm glad you brought up,
From the next generation.
I'm glad you brought up the walking stick. It's when Citizen gets the walking stick at the end of that play, it just fills me up. It's such a powerful moment. I mean, you're right, there are those moments.
Except
at the end
along
of
the way
play.
somewhere, as I was talking to Harry Belafonte a week ago, somewhere along the way, we lost our way. August was saying, Citizen, take that stick and carry on. But I would say right now, it's in the recent past, we've lost our way. We lost our barometer. We lost our need to go and pick up that stick.
Who are we gonna give the stick to?
I feel like we're in a King Headley moment, because it's just like, you're killing the next generation, and be careful. You know what I mean? Like, because we lost like, we're not actually passing that on. If we do, we'll kill.
Or as he asked me, who's the voice of Black America now? That's what he asked me. I was like, huh?
Yeah.
Did you have an answer? I didn't hear it.
No, it ain't no answer. The answer is, huh? You know?
And that's part of what's really important about this too, I think, in terms of being able to go to the archives, is the sense of the cost of where we are is less real for our youth. The willingness to experience the pain and discomfort is less present in our youth. Yet I found that in a college situation, when you direct one of these plays, and if you're able to take them there, enter the life, as Felicia talks about, they are transformed and they are given something that no book can give them, because it's there, like, I want to say it's going to church. It's like the mercy seat. It really takes you someplace that is as nurturing, that I believe, as August intended for us to receive from his plays, as he received from our culture.
And you think that can continue? You think August can continue to have that transformative power as we go forward?
If we use the archives. If we use the archives.
Depends on the soldiers.
Yes. And that's part of the question I have right now is because many people are doing the work without being willing to really investigate what it takes to do this work. And I'm very concerned about that. So the archives to me are a solution. I'm already thinking about when I can get students from USC here. How can we get a residency?
You know, most of it's going to be available digitally also.
Oh, well, that's going to be really great. But that's not going to take the place of coming here.
Kenny, do you
sorry,
foresee a time where what we did down at the Kennedy being done again for the newer generation? Because there obviously are new young bucks coming up doing Wilson, saying, "Oh, I've done 2 of them, I've done 3 of them." Do you foresee?
I think the
a
need
time?
for it now, and I think it's great. But a lot in our entertainment world is driven by commerce. So I think it's almost getting to that place where they're like, oh, that could be, now if we can get these actors to do that, and you know, so it becomes.
Right, I think that was the question back then too. How good are they? Look how great they are, and with a few rehearsals, everybody was off book and shining. And
So
doing,
I think yes,
and
but
maybe regional theaters will say we don't need to pay them for 3 weeks to
think
rehearse.
yes.
They can do it in 1 week.
No, I think we can get a bunch of theater companies together, or different cities, to do it. And I also think it can redefine what people think, because you're fighting a contradiction. The contradiction is that, at least for Black Americans and for white Americans, our place here started with slavery. And what August is saying about the city of bones is like, no, you had your own culture, you had your own religion, you had everything before slavery. Stop defining yourselves based on what America says that's the beginning. And America wants us to continue to think that way. So I think doing our tentative plays to say, see, it starts in Gem and Ocean. We can show you, it starts in Genesis and goes to Revelations. We can show you this. So I think we need it more now, because we can see what's happening, because they're trying to hold on to that old definition about what America is and where it started for us. They want it to stay in that, they want that narrative to play out, and we got to reverse that. That's why I love the idea of so many artists now going to Ghana and going back now and saying, wait a minute, we got to redefine the source of our beginning, and that would impact how we tell our stories from that point on.
Well, you stand different if you think your history is 400 years old versus, to the beginning of time. Yeah. So you tell your stories differently. You move differently.
Todd, so on the dramaturgy question, you have this unusual position of not really being a dramaturg. How do you pronounce that? Is it dramaturg?
Dramaturg, yeah. Dramaturg, yeah.
Dramaturg.
Todd is a great writer. And
Todd is a great writer, and Todd knew he wanted to be a writer, but he was a dramaturg. He was August's dramaturg in a way. I mean, how else do you define it? Yeah. Can you say something about that to us?
You mean how I became his dramaturg?
No, not the whole. Well, yeah, that would be great.
No.
But what was your function as a dramaturg? And I'm trying to imagine the connection with the archive.
Well, again, it's a hard thing.
Todd was the original archive.
That's good. That's really good. They should pay him just to stand there and you push a button and.
I'm the archive.
No, it wasn't. I always say it wasn't. It was not a job I applied for at Art Search. It wasn't. It wasn't a grant. It wasn't a role that he really had in his life, to my knowledge. I mean, he definitely worked with a lot of people before me developing the play, but he didn't have. There wasn't me, and it really was, whatever the happy accident of, smoking cigarettes and listening, and I was slowly invited into the writing, and it happened. I don't think either of us, it wasn't, I didn't expect it. I didn't know it was happening. Again, it was hanging out with Mr. Wilson, talking about poetry, hearing stories about St. Paul, and when he used to make, anything to keep us out of the rehearsal room, right? I mean, it was like, it always had, I was a terrible assistant. I was horrible, because it'd always be like, we're going out on a break, and then somebody would come to get us, and they'd be like, we just on a break. And they were like, yeah, it was 2 hours ago. You guys have been out here smoking cigarettes, talking about the thing. But somehow inside of that, we were talking about the play. And so the day that changed my life, I think, as I've been asked to tell this story, is when he brought a note card to me, and he said, Todd, man, he said, King says this in a speech somewhere. He said, but I don't know where it goes, man. Can you find a spot? And I'm like, Mr. Wilson, I'll find 3 spots, And it's like, and we sat at different tables in those days. So he was over there, and he kept cutting me looks, because I think he wanted a smoke break, and I wasn't ready yet. And I'm like, okay, finally looked over to him, I nodded, and we cut out of the room and went downstairs. And I saved my best for last, and he ripped through the first 2 ideas. And he was kind of frustrated and disappointed. And then finally we got to, he says, oh, man, Todd, man, I don't see the scar, man. that's nice, man. That lays in there, man. That just is like it was written there, man. Go put that in stage management. I grew 10 feet. And I was like, I said to Diane DeVita, I said, excuse me, Diane, this goes in the script, you know, and stuff. And then the next day he said, man, Tanya keeps going on, man. She's going off to do something. There's a job, man. What the fuck does she do, man? Like, she needs a job, you know. And then we started talking about what jobs Tanya could have or whatever. So it was just about questions. So I just sort of got engaged in the play, and I became a repository of the different versions and asking questions and stuff. Meanwhile, I'm just soaking up everything from like another favorite story, and this I think is key. This story I think is key in a way you can look at the archives and look at the plays. Is like we were doing King Hedley, and Ruby cusses out stool pigeon, and she said the lie can make the tongue swell, and something will be the bitterest reward. You know, you can go look it up. It's in the Bible. You know, Romans 14:12. That means you can go to hell. And she runs off stage, and I'm like, okay, so dutiful dramaturg, right? I go. I wasn't dramaturg yet, but when dutiful, I go in. I copy my Romans 14:12, and I'm looking at it. I'm like, man. I was like, I think I at least have average intelligence, but I can't figure out how this verse echoes in what he says to her. So finally, I'm like, I just have to eat the crow and just admit my ignorance. And finally, I said, excuse me. I said, Mr. Wilson. I said, Bob Edison. He looked at it. He took it very seriously and said, let me look at it. And he looked at the passage, and he nearsighted and looks down. He goes, Todd, man, he said, 1412? That's my street address. so you'll find that way he flips and fucks with the history and the Bible and even the stuff in Gem, like, you know, when they're battling this philosophical battle, we're making up Bible verses and the thing. We're making up the thing and what he called, you know, man-made law versus God's law, whatever. But it feels like the Bible. It is, and it suits the attitudes and ideas of the characters. But you have to like, you also can't take this stuff. I think that the academic thing is to get, you know, some of the academic stuff we used to read, like in the basement sometimes, and it'd be like, well, you know, Selkirk batted this and this and this, and that means that fences, and that's why Troy's batting average was this and this. And that's all bullshit. Like, that's not, you know what I mean? That's not really helpful. That's like what Monte said about you can be from Pittsburgh, but that doesn't give you any special ticket. You got to put in the work and really uncover, you know, the real stuff. So.
And these archives will stop people from going down those super, like, superfluous routes, right? Of being like, oh, I'm trying to find this connect when it's right there. Yeah. Like, you can go to it and you don't have to look. It's like, it's right there. The connections are right there. You don't have to make it up. Yeah.
So I have a question about, I was talking with my wife, Mary. Some of you know Mary, and you know she's smarter than I am. Talking this morning, I said, what about the problem of sending actors to the archive? And what do you mean problem? She said, it's not a problem. So she said I could call it a potential or something, and something I should ask you guys about. If I'm an actor and I've got a role in King Hedley, I picked that on purpose because it's the one play he said to me once. He said, I think I revised it too much. I put in things, I took out things. I think I went a little bit too far. So let's say your actor goes and reads 8 versions of King Hedley and finds things in his character that he didn't know were there, but aren't there now in the script he's dealing with. So what does that do for that actor? And then the ultimate version of this is somebody goes to the estate and says, I want to produce the version of King Hedley that you did halfway to New York. Because now these things are available, they're there. So I just wondered if you had any thoughts about the potential.
That's never gonna happen. No. It's like, first of all, after you get the rights to the script, you get the rights to the published script. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I have no problem with actors reading as much as they want, because then that's just conversation. And there are a lot of weak directors, but a strong director says, yeah, read. We can debate it. We can say, whoa, we can't do that because it's not realized in this version of the script. One of the things I can say that Shakespeare, I did Much Ado About Nothing and then Hamlet. But I'm just like, August actually, without him knowing it, turned me on to doing Shakespeare well. Because what I did was start asking the same questions of Shakespeare with this scholar. And I said, wait a minute, this song right here that Shakespeare supposedly wrote in 1530, this song, did he actually write that song? The scholar, no, he didn't. Oh, it was like a buddy of his that went, oh, so I can take that song out. Yeah, you sure can. Well, you know, Shakespeare had this joke over here that really is kind of, no, Shakespeare didn't write that joke. That was the Eddie Murphy of his time. So you could change that. So what it did was like, we always put Shakespeare up there. And he's like, it's so high. You know, it's like, so you end up with a lot of bad Shakespeare because it's like, it's up there. And it's like, no, once you bring Shakespeare down, Shakespeare was a man. Just like August, you bring him down. He was a great man. He was a great writer. But you find the person in him, the love. August loved our culture. I can feel the love emanating off those pages. And when you feel that, it's like he loved our culture more than we loved ourselves. And that's what you can get. So I would tell my actors, go there and see how much this man loved what you're doing. He wrote 10 versions of it, and we're only dealing with like 80 pages here. So let's see how much he loved. Are you willing to put in the work that he put in for that? So he did his work. He left us 10 plays. He left it. So what are we going to do? So I would encourage my designer, go there, go, let's read, get all that. Now let's go to work.
You just put it in the satchel, you know? I mean, like I said, that one page from Jim helped me understand the relationship.
And you were able to use that
I was
without
able, it was in,
selling
yeah.
out to it in a way.
Yeah, it helped me fill in the dots, you know, and it's just like in doing 7 Guitars, when things were that I said, somebody else said, it still had already filled me. So going to the archives will help me understand more about the character, but I don't have to like use it all. It just helps build the biography for me, you know.
You can find out what they can't do. They go in there and say, I read all these 10 different verses. Yeah, okay, what can you do? I ain't got but one gear, Mr. Leon. I only do this. So most time, that's why I don't like long table reads, because most actors can't do that. You don't have actors like this, you know, sitting around the table all the time. So sometimes, you know, they don't want to read all that stuff because they can't even do it anyway. And I love actors. I love actors. I love actors. All actors. I love them. Every generation of actors. I love all of them.
Well, can I say something about that, about the parts that were part of the character before and then they were changed? Well, the process of doing King Hedley, when I joined, my favorite line of Mr. was when he asked King all the time, King, do you see a halo over above my head, whatever, right? And so I was doing, you know, Mr.'s like, yeah, I had a dream last night, I had a halo over my head, you know. And so now when we got, that got flipped once we left the Goodman.
Oh, you didn't have that line anymore?
No, after the Goodman, they said, this is what Marion said, King is now going to have the halo. I'm like, what? I was like, huh? Yeah, King's going to have the halo. And it's funny because I was like shocked. I was like, oh man, I ain't gonna have the halo. The reason why I was shocked because before I went on stage, I would be asking the staff or the guards at the booth or whatever at the Goodman before I went on stage, and I would ask them in my own prep before I go on stage, do you see this halo on my head? And they looking at me like I was nuts, right? So then I know when I come on stage and ask King that, I'm gonna get that same similar, maybe I get that react, and so I told the, you know, oh man, King's gonna have the halo, King's gonna have. The understudies in Chicago misinterpreted that to mean that the guy was playing King at that point was going to now play Mr. and that I was going to be fired. I'm like, wait, no, I didn't say that. I just said King's gonna have the halo. And they was gossiping about it. They're like, yeah, Monte said that he's fired and Richard Brooks is he's gonna play Mr. And I'm like, no, I didn't say that. I just said King's gonna have the halo. I didn't say that. Now somebody else was coming to it. Now, it also informed me, so now when Brian Stokes Mitchell was looking at me and say, Mister, do you have a halo on my head? So sometimes I had to bite my lip, because I knew that's a big laugh line. I like, you know, and it was like a little twinkle in her eyes, like, you know, it used to be my line or whatever. Now, with a new actor who's playing Mister, I don't know, he might find that interesting, but he can't do anything about it. You know what I mean? But you know what, I'm gonna tell you, I felt like I had a lobotomy, though. I felt like part of my brain was taken out. As I'm developing Mr. 5 Cities, you know, all of a sudden now he doesn't think like that. He doesn't think that way. So I had to like close that hole for myself. Now, so a new person coming in to do it, I don't know if they'll have that same experience. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But I think they might find it interesting. Wow, Mr. had the halo, and now King, you know, I don't know. Maybe they might, but at least they should know it. They should know it.
It is an interesting angle to Mr.'s character.
Yeah, I think they should at least know it. You know, now what they do with it, we'll see. You know.
Speaks to the dynamic of the two characters. Most definitely.
But the whole idea of the halo alone is like so interesting. I know for me, when I directed it, after seeing it, I saw it early in LA. I never saw it on Broadway, but I saw the taping of it. But the whole idea to me, I got very turned on about, why does King have the halo? And for me, my interpretation was that by him like trying to protect, he earned the halo by the end of the play. He earned it.
So Todd, when I introduced this subject of perhaps people reading too much or possibly too much or whatever, when I said that about directors, you kind of you sort of reacted to what I was saying, because you could understand a director saying, wait a minute, I like this version better. I like that version better of the play.
Oh, sure, yeah, no, you're going to get, that's
and I understand what Kenny's saying, that no, of course the estate would say no, but that doesn't mean that people wouldn't be sort of interested. Oh, I want to do this interesting thing and do a version, a production of the first version of the play, or.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's hard. Again, if you're directing this, I believe, and again, I'm not a director.
But you did directing.
But you get hired on this trip, you know what we're going to rehearsal with.
Right. I mean, the script is gospel in a sense that because directing is an interpretive art form. So I think there's that line that you have to walk where interpretation it's like you said earlier, there's a lot of different, you take those seeds, there can be all kinds of different versions, but there's something integral to it. And when you falter, like I know of productions, or I've seen elements in other productions where, there are things that are done to me that actually betray. I mean, I won't get into it. I've been moved to tears at times and not that there's a one right way to do it. There's 1,000 ways to do it, but there are certain integral things. You can't take a character and sort of demean like the integrity of old Joe and do things, and I've seen that done, and it's just heartbreaking. And so I forget the question you asked me now. I'm sorry, because I just went to that moment of seeing.
Variant productions. I mean, to use your reference there are 2 versions of King Lear, and actually a 3rd version of King Lear printed, and you could choose which you want to produce. And there are several versions of Hamlet.
Yeah. But I'm not, the producers and the directors choose that, so I'm not going to get in rehearsal and the actor says, why can't we use that version?
Yeah, I understand.
Because that's what we're doing this one. And this is why. I'm not even upset. This is why. Shakespeare wrote that version. That's 5 hours and 23 minutes. I don't want to do that in 2023. That ain't going to happen. So my version is 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Yeah, but your version is cut down by someone you've been working with, or
That's
the
right.
producer's been working with. So
Right.
it is.
And that's
kind of
my
a
job.
co-writer.
My job is to pick the draft, to shape the parameters, to set the tone, to get us all in the same story. We all have to agree that's where we're going.
But we're not in that place with August yet, because we're doing the text that he left. We're not at the point where we're reinterpreting, reshaping, recutting the plays, but sometime,
I don't know
at
if we
some
should
point,
get
the
there.
archive might work that way.
I don't know if we should.
I don't
mean,
want that.
I don't know if we should get there, because I've seen like Shakespeare in space. Like, you know what I mean? I don't think we should do, because it's so.
Jim of the Ocean in space.
Yeah, Jim of the Ocean in space would bother me, because then it doesn't make
But
any
it's still
sense.
about intent. When I do Shakespeare, I'm still trying to find out Shakespeare's intention. Why did he write this? And if he was alive, what would he do? The same thing.
And also, like, I like
Isn't
what you
it?
said about elevating him too high, because he was his plays are for the people. But I was like, August Wilson was writing for a particular reason, and if you lose,
And the other thing he was
The
writing,
intention.
August was dealing with those 100 years. He was dealing with that history. So that's a big part of the burden, I think, that he carried too. After he got halfway through, like, well, this is what I'm doing. This is an American thing, so that's a different responsibility. That's not like this, I'm gonna write a play about 3 cats on the corner. He's like, no, I'm writing each decade after a while.
And the reason you have to humble yourself is if you do anything to interfere with the energy, the incantation of what he has written, you completely diminish the experience. Because when he's done well, it's incandescent. And that's what's so difficult, in my opinion, about watching August not done well. And I'm praying that the archives will help mitigate that.
To me, it always sounds like music when the band doesn't know each other, like when it's not done well, because it's supposed to play the instruments playing together, and then it's like, completely change, like put it in a different key. Whoa, like, you know what I mean? Like, no, like, it doesn't sound, it's not how it's written, right? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I could say something the archive might help is I bore witness at some point in the process, especially the last two plays, I saw there was a moment where he clearly became in service to the play itself. And I watched him use the play to teach him how to write the play. So Aunt Esther would teach him how to write the play. Like there was, and I don't mean this in a self-created mythology, he really gave himself, he was humbled before the work. And so if he himself was humbled, then anybody who enters this arena of doing his work, we should have that same humility, because he was. He was in service to it in a way.
But the people got to want to follow.
Yeah.
That's the problem wrong with the world right now. People got to want to listen to the voice.
Yes. There's one thing that this discussion has kind of brought up in me. Even us just walking in there today for a portion of seeing a portion of the archive as a young Black writer, and seeing like I'm getting kind of emotional thing, but I never thought that I would see such care taken with Black art, right? The preservation of Black art, and seeing and just hearing how much time they've taken, and the meticulous nature in which they're going through, and that they are preserving this in a way that, like you said, America has put Shakespeare up there, right? And now to see a Black artist in that same echelon, to be taken care of in the exact same way, like I stepped in before a lot of y'all got there, and I was just silent for a little bit, just be like, this is something I didn't think could happen. As I was dreaming about stories in Houston, Texas, I didn't think that anyone cared enough about Black stories to take care of them in this way, right? Just having this discussion about it is really, it's still coming over me and hitting me in this way. I just wanted to put that in the space.
Well, let me ask you as a playwright.
Yeah.
Is the archive something that might feed back into your playwriting?
Oh, 100%. I mean, being a Black playwright in the American theater is tough, because a lot of times you feel like your stories aren't important. You feel like your voice isn't important. And even just being able to walk into that room and sit among it and be reminded that our stories are important.
That really hits on something. I was having a conversation with a friend that is not Black, who's white, and she says, yeah, you're doing so many, you've done 15 Broadway plays, don't you want to do something like where a Black character is not at the center of the stories? And I know what she was trying to say, but it reminded me of something that August always talk about the universal. Sometimes they talk about the universal, that makes you think that Black is not included. Right. So it has to be done separately. Right. And I'm like, no, I take a great deal of responsibility. I love, in fact, that I do the stories with Black characters, and they're just as important as any other person on the planet. And then I start thinking, I get mad because I say, if I didn't do them, not patting myself on the back, but it's like, there should be so many more Blacks and women directing plays on the commercial stage. And it's like, if you take the plays, those 15 plays that I've done, that's a sad case. That's a sad case, and that's like, and August know that they're gonna fight to this, so keep trying to tell these stories. So no, what would it serve me to direct a play with an all-white cast, because it's all white? There's no value in that. It's like, if you ask me to do Hamlet, there are Black people in Hamlet because that's the way I see the world.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, this is the way the world looks to me.
There are also Black people
your
there.
Your world looks racist.
Black people were there when he was writing.
Yeah.
We just have
Well, August
up.
tells stories about that. The guy who came up to him, he'd written 2 or 3 plays, and wonderful plays, August, but when are you going to put this special stuff aside and write about the real world?
Well, no, he actually, that's a great story, Chris. I'm sorry, I don't want to, but the actual story, because I was thinking of this, it's so August is at the O'Neill, it's piano lesson, which is, help me out, that is the what? number 4. So he's written 4 plays, and he's at the O'Neill. And by the time he's there at piano lesson, Fences is a hit or whatever. So a critic, and to this day he never named the critic, but is a very well-known critic. And he said to him, well, Mr. Wilson, now that you've exhausted the African-American experience, what are you going to write about next? And did I hit my mic?
No, not exhausted.
No, exhausted. And when you said that, Kenny, I thought of that story as you did, because that's the subtext that's out there. And it's still, those, as he said, those ideas and attitudes are still alive today. Linguistically, we've learned people aren't saying them, but that's still that sort of attitude now that is exhausted, because it's seen as less than, or it's seen as a subculture or something, as opposed to something that can stand up.
Yeah, I definitely see this as a situation where, I mean, like the theaters in nearby. Well, how far is Cincinnati from Pittsburgh? Like 2?
Forever.
Really? No, I don't know. I know Cleveland's 2 hours.
Yeah.
But I mean, the productions.
further,
Well,
yeah.
okay. Well, the productions that are at the Cincinnati Playhouse or the Cleveland Playhouse. Maybe them taking a road trip before rehearsal starts or on a Monday to come down there, and particularly if they have a veteran director who says, I want to just have y'all completely immersed, not just reading the dramaturg notes, but go down there, and I don't know how far away people would travel to it, but if the people who are local or at least 2 or 3 hours away, I could definitely see them saying, let's take a trip to archive and see what we can.
That's a wonderful idea, that the library could have scholarships to let productions come, and then we'll give them something with the house, and then there's the exhibit at the August Wilson Center.
The fans of the Atlanta Falcons come here to see the Steelers.
Yeah, for example. Well, there's so much to say about that huge pile of wonderful material sitting over there in the library. One of the wonderful things about it, of course, is that August had his hands on it. I remember some years ago when I started teaching teaching a course in his plays, and I had a copy of early version of Jitney that he'd given me, which is just precious to me, and putting people in touch with that, even though a lot of it's going to be Xeroxed or preserved in various ways. So I wanted to ask you, I think this is a reasonable question, what do you think August would think about this archive being institutionalized or saved, preserved, made available, however you want to describe it, in the way that it has been? Do you think he'd be pleased by it? Do you think he'd have some kind of question about it? Todd, what do you think?
Well, he definitely wanted it done. I mean, with intention, like clearly. I mean, this was something, actually, even before he was diagnosed, he wanted the two of us to, actually, he was working with Ben, actually, to get some financing so that we could go and, in the middle of working on some of the plays, sort of take 3 or 4 months, and he wanted to go through it together and sort of identify what the collection was. So he wanted this to happen. And then when he was diagnosed, the gas went on, and I was living with him, or I stayed at the house at the time, and we started to go to the University of Washington, and they showed us like how they archive. They said, well, you've got to put it in acid, and you did this, and blah, 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 blah. And, as we could see the time was running out, we focused on radio golf and just sort of talked about this. And then I was sort of left in a house for 5 or 6 months to go through it myself. It's about 5. It was he died in October 2nd, and May 5th is when I left Seattle. So from when he died to, and he did a little bit of it with me, not much, a little bit of it, but then I was sort of in the house and sort of going through it, and and there were things that he sort of instructed me, things he wanted, and so that I can say with confidence, he wanted this to happen somewhere. He didn't identify where he wanted it to go or when. And I would say the care, I remember much to what you said, which was so moving, what you said about how you experienced all of the care and where they put, and I think, I was moved by that. And I never like to say this is what he would have felt or whatever, but I will say we went to the University of Washington and how they were so careful with those papers and stuff, and the way that we saw. I'd like to think, it feels like it's done lovingly and with integrity and a lot of thought, and they've put years, and they know there's more years of work into it. So I don't know if that answers.
I have a little response to it myself. a parallel. When we're standing in front of the house, August Wilson House, which was really decrepit then, he said, if you guys are ever going to do anything with this house, I don't want it to be a museum. I want it to be useful. There's kind of an analogy there to what you would do with the archive. I mean, you've already made a very moving statement about how it felt just to be in the presence of it and understand the way it was going to be taken seriously. Any other thoughts about how he might feel about the archive? It's really sort of broadens also into how the world might feel about an archive. Just curious.
Well, I just want to say boldly that it's sacred. It's sacred, the development of all of this. It's precious and sacred. Because I say that because I feel like who he is and what he's given the world is still being discovered. And he's also very real, you know, touchable, earth, all of that, but the process of elevation in his own life to, I suppose, the realization and ownership of his own spirit, so that the person he had to please the most was himself, is one of the biggest lessons that I think he's left us
He says
with.
that in his 60 Minutes interview with Ed Bradley. Ed asked him, well, who do you write for? And he says, well, there's a white audience and a black audience. I don't really write for either of them. I write for myself.
Yes. And to stand in your own faith and love in your own being and what he did to do, it's like what it took for him to do that, to unshackle his own self, is one of the biggest gifts to me that August has given all of us, that we can walk that walk ourselves, you know? And that process is part of what, to me, the archives give us a chance to step into how he did it. A roadmap.
Yeah, it will take some work. I mean, I can see scholars going in and all kinds of elaborate academic papers coming out of it, and that's not quite the same thing as putting yourself into the experience.
It's a gift to the next generation, to the roadmap part, which is like, you know, you look at these people, they're introduced in a textbook, and, you know, and you're given these like untouchable figures. And I feel like the fact that you can go in and like, I'm a tactile learner, so like going in and like physically touching things to learn how, I think is a gift to the next generation of makers. Cause you like the how did you do that? You know what I mean? Like, how did you get here? 50 drafts for one play. Like, you know what I mean? And like countless notebooks and reinterpreting, revisions, taking notes, work notes, like, you know what I mean? Going to see a play, seeing it 15 times, taking that in, that learning the process of creation is actually as important as experiencing the creation itself, I think, for at least the next generation of theater, like, you know, people who are trying to make this thing, I think is like beyond the cycle and the how I learned what I learned. It's like, how did you make an entire like collect series of plays, you know, because especially with being how commercial things are moving right now, it's like how much money can you make as fast as you can make it. Something like that, realizing that it took him 40 years, you know, to kind of like, from the idea, the sparks of the idea, writing on it while working at a cafe, while doing, you know what I mean? And like moving across states, like that, accessing that and actually getting to look at it as it's going and watching how things change from, you know, one decade to the next as he was writing it, I think is like priceless kind of access to the process of creating this like magnum opus, so that you can be like, okay, how would if I have an idea, right? I have an epic story that I want to write, or like, I have a play that I want to, how would I even go about doing it? You can go to the archive and learn how somebody made something this huge. And I feel like we don't talk about the process and how, like, we talk about it, but I feel like it's kind of becomes invisible because you kind of, by the time you get to the show and opening night, you know what I mean, we're all wearing, you know, nice outfits and nobody can tell that I'm bleeding underneath my blazer, like, you know, to get to this thing, like, you know what I mean? And I feel like this is showing the not as pretty part of making 11, well, like 15 plays, like, you know, the 11 that we see, that we have access to, plus like, you know, 50 poems.
But there's also, you know, written on those pages, like experience, lived experience. And it's written down in his own hand. And we can touch it. We can learn from it. And I don't know if there's anything else in the world where we have that tangible culture and heritage and history and people living within that history in certain ways, and then we as creators interpret that history and put it on the stage, and it's all just right there for us to touch and to feel and experience. But we're bringing different experience and extrapolating experience. I hope I said that correctly, and that warms me, that we, you know, as African American people have experience in something that we can touch and feel and learn from and process. Put a period on the end of that.
I gotta think of August. I'd have a different idea about life and the time we put on it, and so I always think of it as like a big circle, like it's forever and it's eternal, you know what I mean? It's like, if I could just do 2 of the plays that August wrote in my lifetime, like, that would be enough. This man put down 10. So it also reminds me of the thing that you told me about August. He was like, you know, talking about life and death and all the plays. And he's like, no matter how old you are, when death comes, you say, what? So soon? Already? You know what I mean? So that's what I think August would say if he could look at it and he'd say, what, so soon? I have some other stuff to do, but, you know. So I think he'll be proud that in some version people can read the work and carry on the work.
I hope it will enrich the thing that I've always wanted to spend time on, but I'm always racing to this and that and the other thing. I really want to sit down and look at the history of father and son in August's work, because it was very important in his life, more important than he was willing to admit in interviews. He had more of a relationship with his father, who he said was not really part of our lives, than he was willing to admit. He and I talked about that a little bit, because my father and mother were divorced when I was very young, and then my father died. I never had that chance for that kind of connection. And I look at what happened with Jitney. He wanted to rewrite it and tackle the father-son more fully, and he never really did. I mean, he took it a little bit further, but he never really got it that far. It's in Fences, it's in, well, so many of the plays. There are pieces of that parent-child thing. And I think looking at the series of scripts will teach me more about how he was dealing with it, or at least satisfy me in my own need to encounter him dealing with it.
Probably that.
Pardon?
Probably the latter.
Yeah, sure. No. And as I say, it was something that we had a chance to talk about somewhat. And so getting to be closer to the person, having to some extent known him, but now getting closer to the person through those manuscripts is a pleasure that I look forward to.
Yeah, that's great.
So any other final thoughts on this? What the archive means to you, how you're going to use it, how much pleasure August would take in the way that you're using it?
I mean, everybody should go. If I'm gonna put in my sign up now to go visit the archives, it's worth the trip, I think. Because I don't know, just it's small, but how somebody writes a word actually tells you a lot about what they were trying to get you to say. Or how you were supposed to feel when you read it. So just literally looking at how he wrote the words will give you a different view on his him as an artist, I think.
I think he should have written in big, bold letters on the wall in the archive is, "So live."
There you go.
So we're really happy that you were with us today, and what I can say to you now, for the end of this, is go to the August Wilson Archive.